Hey everyone, in this video we'll be looking at how to set up and post external sources. There's a lot of reading over on the documentation on this topic, all of which has been linked in the description, and some of which I'll be referring to in this video. We're specifically focusing on WEM Playback because it's optimized for Wwise and the target platforms, though I will make a video soon after on the new WAV Playback as well. We won't be using any scripts or tools, just so that you can really get a handle on what is going on with your files. I would suggest setting them up for populating the XMLs and CSVs that we'll be covering later. To give a brief overview, we'll be looking at creating the external source audio object and associated event in Wwise, creating your own conversion settings, creating the input path and the output path, creating and populating the WSOURCES XML, specifying these paths in your Wwise project settings, converting your WAV files to WEM, enabling the external source module in your Unreal project, creating the default media and media info data tables, creating these CSVs and importing them as a source, and lastly setting external source media and posting your external source event.
Good job!
To start off, we'll make an object and add an external source in the contents window. You'll notice that the name of the source dictates the cookie, which is generated from the AKFNV hash. In older versions, having a cookie that exceeds the maximum int32 value posed a problem, as the data tables would not accept a value larger than that. But in newer versions, such as Wwise 2025.1.3, it seems like this has been addressed with int64. Keep this in mind if you're working with an older version, and name your sources appropriately. Next, we'll create an event and drag in our external source object. Note that if an event triggers the playback of more than one external source, they must be named uniquely in the project and therefore have a unique cookie, in order to tell them apart when filling in the AK external source info structures. Now, before we generate sound banks, there's quite a few things we need to do before moving over to our game engine. First, we'll create our own conversion settings in the Share Sets tab. For now, I'm just going to keep everything default, though you may want to explore other format options depending on your needs. Also note that to avoid reconversion, Wwise saves some of the data in wwise.dat file in the output directory. This file is not necessary for your game, so you shouldn't include it in your final build. If this file is deleted, all WAV files will be reconverted. After that, we'll then make an input path and an output path. I've chosen to do this in my Wwise project folder, naming the input path external sources and the output path generated external sources. In our input path, we can enter our WAV files and move on to creating our WSOURCES XML. To do so manually, simply create a new text document and reformat by changing the extension to .wsources. As for the contents, you'll find an example on the documentation under integrating external sources. In my case, the root is the input path, and we can just enter the WAV names as it is. The conversion name should be identical to our custom one we made beforehand, and the destination and analysis types are optional. After closing off our list, we'll head into the project settings external source tab, and point to our external source list we just made, as well as the output path. Lastly, we'll need to convert our external sources. There are a few ways to do so, either through the Wwise authoring API or the Wwise console, but for this example, I'll just be doing so alongside sound bank generation. You can see if you have this enabled by heading over to your user sound banks external source tab and having this box checked. After generating the banks or converting using one of the other methods, you'll know if it was successful if you have the WEM files in your output path. That wraps up everything we needed to do in Wwise, so now we'll move on to the steps for Unreal. Firstly, in our DefaultEngine.ini, which you can find in the project under config, or just by searching in your IDE, we need to enable the simple external source manager module. This is done by entering the following lines. Afterwards, we can head into Unreal and create two data tables, one for default media and another for media info. In our file explorer, we can then create two CSVs for the respective tables. Once again, you can do so by renaming the extension. Starting off with our default media, we should first define the properties according to the documentation. After that, since we only have one event in this demonstration, we'll enter the name and the cookie, which should be identical, the external source name, the media info ID, which I've set to 1 to match the desired external source media info ID for the default playback, and lastly the media name. Feel free to name this to one of your WEMs. In my case, I've just duplicated the external source name and pops.wem afterwards as a default entry, since I know I'll be swapping this out before posting. As for our media info CSV, we'll want to separate the properties like before according to the documentation, and begin filling in the information. For the name and external source media info ID, I would suggest incrementing by 1. The media name is just the file name with the extension used to find the file on the disk, and the codec ID should be set to the appropriate value to decode the media. Because I have used PCM encoding, I've set this to 1, which is in line with AK constants that you can find under AK codec ID in AK gameplay types, as advised by the documentation. Lastly, I've decided not to stream these lines or use specific device memory, and I've set the memory alignment and prefetch size to 0. Now that we've filled in the CSVs, we can simply set them as a source in the data table details and re-import. Also, don't forget to hook up these data tables and the staging directory in the Unreal project settings under Wwise simple external source settings. All that's left to do now is to set the media by name and post the external source event. You'll notice that I've made a function for this, where the default name is our external source name, and default media name is that placeholder WEM. In this example, I've gone ahead and set the media to the congratulations line, and even included a callback to the end of the event to play the line "You are dead" afterwards. Hopping into our scene,
Congratulations! You are dead.
we can hear this is working properly, and we can even interrupt the line per game object with concurrency, so the NPC will say error midway through their current line.
Error.
While I would usually set the media by name, do also know that setting by ID works just as well, where the ID should match the ExternalSourceMediaInfo ID. If you want to do this in C++, simply visit the external source statics, set the media using your preferred method using the respective function, and then post the event as you usually would.
Good job.
As usual, I hope this video helps you learn something new, and feel free to leave any questions below.